Andrew, the other news today out of Parliament, that legislation on the workplace relations reforms.
Yes, so we move on from the budget to this controversial IR legislation with the Minister Tony Burke introducing this to the House this morning. The government says they can introduce this to lift wages despite the spectre of inflation, but they raise concerns that electricity bill rebates in the face of soaring power prices can increase inflation.
Today, inflation is running at 7.3% and wages are at 2.6%. Every day, the impact of a decade of wage stagnation is felt by households trying to make ends meet. The urgency of getting wages moving is most acute in feminised industries. The gender pay gap still sits at an unacceptable 14.1%.
The most contentious part of this legislation is this move to multi-employer bargaining. The bill, the opposition will argue, is not an opt-in, and small employers could be compelled to work with bigger employers. A local hamburger shop, for example, could be forced to enter the same enterprise agreement as a McDonald's, or all the tenants of a shopping centre could be compelled to enter the same agreement. In an interview with Kieran, we'll hear in a moment, ACTU Secretary Sally McManus doesn't believe that would happen.
There's also a view being suggested from the business lobby that if you have, say, a rule, an EBA agreed to by McDonald's, that would then be imposed upon a small burger joint. Is that possible under this bill?
I think that's pretty wild extrapolation of what may or may not be possible, and I think that there's no ambition by the trade union movement to do that. Like, it's just weird hypotheticals, quite frankly. So a small burger joint, number one, will be excluded because they've got less than 15 employees who are excluded from the multi-employer bargaining part that we're talking about. McDonald's wouldn't be.
The provision of the bill which does this allows for, quote, providing for employee bargaining representatives to apply for a single interest employer authorisation to cover two or more employers, subject to majority support of the employees. The legislation also alters the Better Off Overall test, so hypothetical working arrangements can't be taken into account, correcting a mistake that Tony Burke feels was made with Julia Gillard's original Fair Work Act. Well, Andrew McKellar's from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he had another name for this legislation.
The reality is this bill could be called the More Strikes and Job Losses Bill, because that's the risk that we will see if this bill is passed in its current form.
As for the Greens, who hold 12 of the 13 votes needed to pass the bill in the Senate, leader Adam Bandt says he'll consider giving it his support.
The Greens' test will be to make sure that this legislation works for women and especially lifts the wages of the lowest paid in our country, which are more often women, but also that it works for carers and that it gives people who have caring responsibilities a better balance so that they can not only earn an income but do what is needed to look after the people who are closest to them.
David Pocock, the independent senator, the other crucial vote there. He hasn't decided yet. He tried to move a motion to have it referred to committee till February. The government wants it done and dusted by the end of the year. He lost that motion by one vote in the Senate.
Okay.